G'day guys, Aaron Lewis, the CEO and Senior Physiotherapy Consultant here at Performance 360. Do you suffer heel pain? Is it really affecting your ability to go out there and go for a good run, or affecting your ability to play soccer, AFL, rugby league and those sort of things? Well, there might be some tips that we'll give you here today to help you out. A lot of the stuff you read out there is pretty shit, some of it is legit. Hopefully today we can help you differentiate the right advice for you to make sure you're better and you can be a better you. So heel pain, what is it caused by? Well, often it's caused by the Achilles tendon. And what we find with the Achilles tendon is it runs down into the back of the heel here like this and straps around into there like that. Now, if you're getting pain quite close to the heel, that needs to be treated differently as if you're getting pain further up the tendon. What we often find is that there's a couple of other little structures in and around the heel which can impact your ability to have your Achilles tendon function pain-free and appropriately. The first sits in behind the heel here. It's called the retrocalcaneal bursa. The tendon wraps around into that position there. The other is called the Kager's fat pad, which sits in here behind the tendon or in front of the tendon behind the shin. What we often find is that when your ankle goes into a stretch position as you do when you run, we can get a compression somewhat of the Achilles tendon into that bursa, or a compression of the fat pad into the front part of the Achilles tendon. Normally, the bursa should allow the tendon to run smoothly through there, as should the fat pad. And when it doesn't, we go through a whole cycle of events where we get extra swelling and fluid that builds up into these areas, and the front part of the tendon starts to compress into there and starts to break down into what we call tendinopathy. From here, it needs to be managed differently to how you would manage other parts of the tendon and or heel pain. And here's where a lot of things start to go wrong. What we need to do, first of all, is get the pressure off the tendon. So we need to make sure we're not in a position where we're putting the tendon onto too much stretch. What we then need to do when we target our rehabilitation and get some load into the tendon, we need to make sure that the front part of the tendon is targeted, because that's the area that we undergo most of our tendinopathy. What we often then see is we need to make sure the back part of the tendon is working appropriately, can handle whatever you need to do for it in the meantime. So the front part of the tendon attaches to a part of the calf muscle called the soleus. So when we're doing our rehabilitation, we need to make sure we're rebuilding and making sure the soleus component is targeted appropriately. We also need to make sure that the other parts of the calf muscles can handle whatever you need to keep doing, because we want to keep you active and doing things in the meantime. Okay, so let's have some tips for managing your Achilles tendinopathy or your heel pain, especially if it's right onto that insertion. First things first, let's get yourselves just a little heel raise. Here we've got one that's probably about 6 or 7 mils high, which is perfect. It'll just take enough pressure off the heel and allow you to continue your activity in the sports that you need to do. It's important, slip that in the shoe, get used to it and be comfortable. You can use anything that's going to pop the heel up a little bit there for you. Second, we don't want to stretch it, okay? None of getting onto these sort of things and stretching out into there. It may actually feel really good when you first do it, but afterwards what's going to happen is that compression around the tendon or the heel is going to increase, and it's going to continue that tendinopathic reaction, okay? So let's not stretch. If you've been given that advice, it's shit. Okay, let's not stretch the tendon. I can't emphasize how important that is. Third, we want to start some sort of contraction and build some pain-reducing load into the tendon. And one of the best ways to do that is through an isometric contraction. There's a couple of different ways we can do it. Basically, looking at my left leg, we'll come up, put ourselves into this position, put our weight onto the ball of the foot, and then we basically put all our weight onto that left leg and hold. Okay, the first time we do this, we want to take it a little bit easy, but we want to be able to hold this for about 40 seconds. We can have the knee bent in different positions, but let's make sure that the ankle doesn't go into any degree of stretch at all, okay? So keeping your heel up nice and high, we hold for about 40 seconds, then we give it a bit of a rest. And back onto it again. The 4 lots of 40 seconds is about the recommended dosage for this, and it's really good to do before you have any activity, during breaks in activity, so half time for instance, and definitely at the end of a game or a run or something like that. It's really important that you continue doing this all the way through your rehabilitation. It's a really simple way to get rid of some pain in and around your heel and Achilles tendon. Next, we want to be able to keep you doing activity. The worst thing we can do is have to rebuild you back from nothing. Load management is a really important concept in everyone's rehabilitation, and if they're not managing that appropriately, it's going to result in other problems down the track, okay? So we need to find a way to keep you running, training, playing to a tolerable level. The best way to measure that is having a look at your response or your capacity and ability to do things in the short term. We have a look at how you've pulled up the next day. If the next day you get up and you've got a lot of pain in your Achilles tendon right on the heel, we may have overdone it and we've got to pull it back a peg or two. But generally, if you're a bit sore afterwards, you've gone for your run or played a game and it's a little bit sore, you do your isometrics and you can sort of control it, and the next day it's not too bad, and the day after that it's pretty good, then we've probably got the dosage right, and we need to record that and then work out the rest of your program from there. Finally, we're all very keen to get that cortisone injection jabbed into the Achilles tendon. This may be required down the track, but don't go down that path straight away. One, we don't want to inject in the Achilles in general, but two, if we do want to look at injecting, we're going to look at either the fat pad or the retrocalcaneal bursa like we talked about before. We want to get those a little bit reduction in the swelling and reduce their size so the Achilles tendon isn't compressed. But let's not go down that path straight away. Let's build some structure back into the tendon, get some pain relief, and then see if we can work on cortisone down the track if it's still required. Okay, so now we're at the stage where we want to start loading up the tendon. If anyone has told you to rest it for long periods of time, give it a couple of weeks rest and it will get better, absolute crap. Don't do it. You want the legit advice, you've got to make sure you're putting some load into the tendon. Now we have to manage the type of loading we're doing with your activities. But fundamentally, if we've got some issues there with the front part of the tendon or the way the plantaris is impacting onto the side of the tendon, we want to go into a position where we're loading it up without having any big stretch component onto it. So what we want to do is we want to have a look, see if we can get ourselves on a seated calf raise or on a leg press machine and do some bent knee calf raises, but with our heel not on any degree of stretch. So two ways we can go about the way we load up a tendon, especially in the early stages. One, if we know we've got some issues with the front part of the tendon, the one that comes off the soleus into there, then we want to be able to target that. And there are some theories that we can actually regenerate part of that front part of the tendon and get it stronger and build onto that. If it's too far degenerated or it's been there for too long, and depending on what we see on our scans and images, it may not be the most appropriate way to go. But regardless, it's a good place to start. We'll know pretty quickly if we're making a difference into there. So what we're going to do is have a look at what we call the heavy isometric contraction. And what we want to do is assess what our capacity is to handle like our near 100% effort for holding a contraction, and then we want to be able to work out what sort of weight we can be doing it from there. The second way, where what we're looking to try and do is target other parts of the tendon and build bigger tendon in and around it. My only drama with building bigger tendon is that if we are dealing with a compression and we've got some space occupying things that are going on like bursas and fat pads, then if we build bigger tendons, we might build it in the direction where it might be putting more pressure onto those. So we have to be really careful about the type of calf exercises that we do or the type of Achilles exercises that we do. So now, how do we actually assess how we go about determining our maximal load in for the tendon? Now, if you don't have access to a whole heap of fancy things that can measure, then the best thing to do is just do your best guesstimate on a calf raise machine and see what you can actually handle. We want your near maximal 3-second isometric hold. So what we're going to use here is a handheld dynamometer, and that'll give me a pretty accurate measure of what I can handle. So looking at my left leg, I'll pop that into there, I set it all up. I'm now going to push through my the front part of my foot, and I'm going to try and lift that up and see what I can actually record. So as I push in there as hard as I can, as long as I'm holding it for 3 seconds, and relax, we go up to 62 kilos. So now from that, I'm going to work out what I should be doing in terms of my heavy load isometrics to see if I can rebuild some of my front tendon. So we've worked out that I can handle about 62 kilos as my maximal 3-second isometric hold. So what I want to do now with my exercise and loading up my tendon, the front part of my tendon in particular, is that I want to be about 90-95% of that maximal amount that I can handle. So here in my case, I've got about 59 kilos of weight onto my seated calf raise machine, and we're going to go through how to actually load up the tendon appropriately. So what we want to do is we want to do a single 3-second calf raise or calf hold isometric contraction. We want to be able to hold that in a position where it's nice and safe. We don't want to put a fast load or a really shocking contraction into it. We just want to make sure it can handle. Now, it will be hard, it will be heavy, and it will be really difficult. You need to make sure you can set this up safely, and often it's good to have someone helping you do this and guiding you through it. Second, we don't want this ankle on stretch. We need to keep it up nice and high and get that load into it from almost like a tippy toe position, or as high as we can actually handle into there. So what I'm going to do with mine today is I'm going to set up my calf raise machine, nice and heavy, going to get the weight off. Now, the key for me in this position here is I want to take most of it with my right leg, which we're going to presume is my good leg, and my left leg is my rehab leg. So when I go into there, you can see my ankle is higher than the ball of my foot, and I'm holding that up into there. We're going to get ready. I'm going to steadily take the weight off my right leg so it's all onto my left. 1, 2, 3, and then I'll bring my right leg back into play and rest it for a few seconds. And back down again, right leg's off, 2, 3, and back on. Back onto it again, left, 2, 3. Should always be pressing through the ball of your foot, not trying to lift your knee up. 1, 2, 3, and then we lift up with both, rest and relax. We want to be able to do those 5 sets of 3 seconds. We want to give ourselves a little bit of a rest in between. If it does feel a little bit sore, we may want to do some isometric contractions and then get ready for the next set. We want to be doing 5 sets of 5 with 3-second holds, and we want to be doing this at least twice a week, depending on what else we're doing in terms of our activity and our load management. Okay, so now we want to be able to start looking at building into what we call heavy slow load training. This is going to allow the areas around the tendon to grow a little bit bigger, similar to when you go to the gym and want to build bigger muscle. So here we're going to focus on a really slow contraction. Now, if you have the insertional Achilles issue right onto the heel there, we need to make sure we don't go onto full stretch. But if we're looking at just trying to build the tendon around it, we're going to actually look at focusing onto different parts of the tendon and try to build bigger tendon. And this might be really useful for people who've got really, the front part of the tendon is really degenerative. It's not going to rebuild its structure. We've done the heavy isometrics, or we've just decided based on the UTC scans or whatever other imaging we've got, that it's best just to go into the heavy slow load and start targeting the areas around it. So what we're going to do first is assess what we need to do and what sort of weights we need to put onto it to make sure we get the loading appropriately right. So again, we go to our dynamometer, and I'm basically going to go into a straight position into there, point my knee a little bit more straight to what it's been, and then I push through the ball of my foot, and we can see through that position there, I'm handling about 68 kilos. Okay, so we've determined that with my maximal load that I can handle into there, that for a heavy slow load contraction, I want to be about 80% of what my maximal isometric hold is. So in my case, that's about 54, 55 kilos. So today we're going to use a leg press machine, an incline leg press machine. We've got it set onto the calf press setting, and we're going to go through a really slow contraction. There's 3 different types of contractions I like to do on this, and I like to have the knee just a little bit bent, and then we have the foot on different angles depending on the part of the tendon that we want to target. In some cases, we want to build bigger, thicker tendon in and around the inside of the calf, the part that comes off the medial gastrocs. Other times we want to target the lateral part and hit the parts that come off the lateral part of the calf called the lateral gastroc. So we're going to try a couple of different positions for those, but the theory is still the same. We want to target a particular part of the tendon as best we can, and we want to do a contraction up and down over about 6 seconds. If you don't have access to a leg press machine, we can certainly do it in a standing position with weights upon our shoulders, or in a standing calf raise machine if you've got access to one of those at your local gym. So to set ourselves up, we get our calf or our foot onto the plate, lift up with both legs into there like that. I'm going to keep my safety locks on because it is quite heavy. We're going to be pushing through the ball of the foot. Now my knee's going to stay just a little bit bent because we find we get better contraction of the calf muscle in that position into there. And I'll take my right foot off and it can protect me there. And we're going to slowly load onto that and then push up through the ball of the foot into there and then back down. Now if we've got an issue with our insertion, we don't at this stage want to go into full dorsiflexion or full ankle stretch. So from here, just a straight up, hit all parts of the calf, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, without going into full stretch. Into there like that, 5, 6. Just have a rest for a tick. What we now want to do is maybe have a look if the UTC scan indicates that we want to build bigger tendon on the inside, the part that comes off the medial gastrocs. We're going to rotate our hip inwards. We're going to keep our knee a little bit bent and do the same thing. We're going to push up through the ball of our foot, particularly towards where the big toe is. 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And in this case, I'll feel that heavily through the inside part of my calf and into the inside part of my tendon. Likewise, if we wanted to hit the outside part and target the lateral gastrocs, I'm going to be in this position. I'm going to rotate my hips slightly outwards into there. I'm still going to be pushing through the big toe. And we go from there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so it's really important as we go through our Achilles rehabilitation that we actually get into general strengthening for our calf muscles. So if we've gone through the process, particularly for an insertional Achilles, maybe at the stage where we've done like where we're getting heel pain, we've done our heavy isometrics, and then we've progressed onto our heavy slow load training, and we haven't gone into like a full range or thing as yet. We now want to start looking at going into the actual calf strengthening phase. Now the phases the time you spend in each of those other phases can vary. It depends a lot on the activity that you're doing. So it's not like it's a simple 2 weeks here and 2 weeks there, and then progressing onto that. And sometimes we can actually do a combination of all three depending on what we're targeting. So for instance, we might find that we're handling going into a stretch position a little bit better, and we're seeing changes on the UTC to say that we're not getting any big compression from the Achilles, the retro of the Achilles onto the bursa or onto the fat pad. We may have even had an injection of cortisone at this stage depending on how they're behaving and responding as well. So a whole heap of variables determine how long we spend in each phase. We go through the period with the heavy isometrics. We still may be doing those now, still doing the 5-second holds, 4 sets of 6, 5 sets of 5, something in that sort of vicinity, so we're putting a lot of load into it. When we're doing our heavy slow load training, we want the reps lasting about 6 seconds, different parts of the heel into different amounts of ranges, and we want to be doing about 4 sets of 6 of those, or even 5 sets of 5. The numbers don't really matter as long as it's heavy and slow and we're in control of it and we're not putting pressure onto the part of the tendon that we don't want to, and in particular we want to be targeting the part that we want to see the changes. So when we move into doing our standard calf training, where I like looking at the standing calf raise here, we can go into a few different positions, but you can certainly do seated calf raises as well. In fact, I would encourage it. And again, we look at different positions. So from here, I'm going to pop myself up onto our machine, take the weight off. I've got 40 kilos onto a 20 kilo bar. And from here, knees slightly bent. Look at my left leg there. And we're basically pushing up as high as we can and then back down. Now, if we've got insertional issues still, right onto the heel, we may not want to push all the way down, but we're just looking at good steady contraction, and then steadily as we get better, increasing the pace. And we're looking at about sets of 6 to 8, where we can get really good strength changes into our whole Achilles and calf muscles. Some people may want to do sets of up to 10 to 12. Again, it's very dependent on what you want to do with it from there. But ultimately, we need to start strengthening that calf and Achilles complex as a whole. 3 sets of about 6 to 8 would be my ideal for most people into there. And again, we can go into different positions. We can do our standing calf raise. If we want to target the inside, if we found that there's particularly a deficiency in terms of our strength testing of the calf, that you might find the inside part may not be as strong as the outside part and could affect the way we actually have pressure on various parts of the tendon. So we may want to have our foot rotated in slightly, and again pushing up through the big toe and back down. Keeping our knee a little bit bent or straight, depending on what you actually want to target. And same, we can go onto the outside and lift up through the big toe again, so we target the outside part of the calf. When we're doing those, we may not be targeting the tendon specifically. We're going to be targeting the whole musculotendinous complex in from there. Okay, so a quick recap. We've determined that you've got an insertional Achilles issue. You've gone through a whole process where we've given you some advice and some tips on things to do in the short term to help alleviate it. A lot of those can hold true throughout your entire rehabilitation, so it's really important to follow that advice. We've gone through the purpose and the assessment for doing a heavy isometric. We've gone through the heavy slow load process. We've looked at targeting different parts of the calf depending on what your imaging or your symptoms or your clinical assessment suggests. And then we've gone through a whole series of programs to get you to the point where we're changing or we're making some structural changes to the Achilles tendon or rebuilding its capacity. We've then gone through the general components of strengthening your calf in different positions as well, and making sure that if there's any weak parts of the calf that they're dealt with, or that the overall calf and Achilles complex is dealt with properly. Now we're into the final stage. And what we want to do here is making sure that we're rebuilding your power component to your Achilles and calf. And that's what it does. It's designed to go into full stretch, develop a spring, and then propulse you forward or upward. So it's really important that we do exercises that contribute to that. That includes doing vertical and horizontal hopping. You can do weighted hops, you can do weighted leaps, you can do a lot of balance exercises, mini tramp running, anything into there like that. It's really important that you add these things in, and you may continue with these as well as your calf strengthening for a period of time well after your Achilles rehabilitation is finished. It's also important that we have a look at the overall body. We have a look at your entire kinetic chain. Are there contributions coming from your hip, your low back or your knee which are putting excessive strain or improper load back into your Achilles as you're running? Is it a problem from the other side? These are the sort of things that we need to assess and make sure that we optimise to improve your running style. And on that, when you are running, there are various techniques and different ways to run, different footwear, different things like orthotics, which can affect your biomechanics. They may be useful as well as you go along the whole process. We have talked a little bit about cortisone injections. They may be indicated at the appropriate time. Same with what we call PRP injections, which can help to rebuild parts of the tendon there as well. It's just an important thing to understand when and why we're using those things as part of your rehabilitation. Don't just jump straight onto them straight away. They need to be used in conjunction with your loading. It is also important, like we said early on, to make sure you continue doing the activity that you want to do. It is very rare that we need to take you completely out. We will need to modify, but taking you completely out means we've got to rebuild you back in, and that can take a long time and cause problems with other parts of the body. So at the end of all this, we hope you've got some tips and advice on how to best handle an insertional Achilles pain, how to identify it, how to look after it initially, and how to progress through your rehabilitation. If you do have any other questions or want to know anything more about Achilles or heel rehabilitation, certainly pop a question in down below or get in touch with us, www.p360.physio, and look at our Facebook page. Any questions or get us on Messenger, I'll happily answer them for you. But hopefully from all this, you can work on being a better you. Thanks a lot. Bye.